everyone, and good whatever moment of this wonderful day you are enjoying on your time zones. And welcome into the conversation, kickstarting the last week of our June series. June was dedicated to everything employee experience here at Hacking HR, and we hope you have been enjoying our chats just as much as we did. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co-host for the next very short hour. We have, as usual, Jessa working her magic backstage. And the first ask of help for today is just drop a few notes in the comments. Maybe just let us know where you're watching us or listening to us from. And this way you will tell us that we are not lost somewhere on the internet, but everything is up and running. And also you will help us travel vicariously through your notes. Just drop a handful of notes and we will take it from there. We have an amazing lineup of speakers for today, and we have a wonderful, wonderful topic. We will be discussing about ways and strategies and why it is important to turn great employee experience into brand reputation. Jessa, if you would help me just bring the speakers on the stage, and while they are getting used to seeing their faces next to one another, I will continue to welcome people in the audience. I see comments coming in, so thank you so very much. And also, just a kind reminder and a wholehearted recommendation: use the chat generously. That is your conversation space just as much as the screen is ours. And whatever it is that we are discussing, please do drop your own ideas, takes on the topic, your own stories. And that is such a generous way to keep this community growing. I will just get the logistics out of the way for the speakers. I would kindly ask you to stay on mute when you are not contributing, and this way we keep each other safe from echo and strange sounds, and the cat will be out of the bag. That's also my cue that you want to step into the conversation as we move forward. So thank you so very much. Now, let's try and make the most out of our time here today. And what I will do, I will pass the e-mic around clockwise as you appear on my screen. So we will be starting with Elizabeth. And the ask is very, very simple, I hope. First, just kindly shortly introduce yourselves. And also, please finish the sentence. Brand reputation is a critical conversation because. So, Elizabeth, welcome. It's so good to have you back in one of my panels. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Minola. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa, Tony, Joe. Nice to be on the panel with you again. And welcome, everyone. Good morning and evening. Elizabeth is my name. I have spent the last 20 years of my life leading HR teams, driving transformation, and of course, creating an employer brand. So to finish the sentence, it is because we win. The conversation is important because that's how we win as an organization.
Thank you so very much. Moving the e-mic to Melissa. Welcome. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Great to see you and great to see all my fellow panelists. My name is Melissa Moore. Like Elizabeth, I've been leading HR teams for my whole career, and I am particularly passionate about talent acquisition, talent development, so all things talent strategy, which is why I love this topic, because it's really how you bring the best talent to your company is through having a strong employer brand. And so that's why this is important, is that it is ultimately the best path to bring incredible talent to your organization.
Thank you so very much. And Tony, it's good to have you on this panel.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And hello to everybody from a very abnormally sunny Amsterdam, which is where I'm based. So absolutely delighted to be here, though. I have also, like Elizabeth and Melissa, spent the last 20 years leading HR organizations in multiple countries and for multiple countries as well. And now I am on my own. I have a new business called The Yellow Box, and I'm working on particularly transformational change within other organizations. And for me, I think the sentence is critical conversation because in this world, I find particularly the newer consumer base are so alert to marketing BS. And that is in all aspects of whatever it is they're consuming, you know, whether it is buying new clothes, whether it is signing up to an Insta channel, or whether it's choosing a company to join. And I find that the old days where we could just do, you know, some very nice marketing story and call it an employer brand, like those days are over. Things have to be authentic now. And that's for me why it's so important to get your brand reputation right, because the Gen Z guys, they will sniff out anything that's not 100% real. So that's for me why it's so important.
Thank you so much. I see a lot of vigorous, supportive nodding on the screen. So, Joe, it's good to see you again. It's been quite a while since we were on the same screen. Good to see you.
It feels like yesterday. Good to see you. And Elizabeth, same with you as well. I'm Joe Pope. I'm the Director of People Operations at Nixon Peabody, an international law firm. And among other things, I oversee staff talent management. And talent attraction is something that I'm very passionate about. I think that it's something that organizations tend to struggle with, and to the earlier points, thought that checking the box by working with marketing on some clever graphics was would do the trick. But we're finding things are changing post COVID, especially post Great Resignation, and I also feel like we're not out of the woods yet with that potential shift in the workforce. To add to that statement, I think that your brand reputation is your primary currency for attracting employees. And if you don't get that right, you're going to pay in other ways. You're going to pay in much higher salaries because you're going to have to find another way to attract people to your organization. You're going to pay possibly with productivity and profitability because you're going to have such challenges with attracting top talent.
Thank you all so very much. This conversation also feels like sunshine, and I'm right there with Tony. We are having the first sunnish day here in Basel, Switzerland. So it's a great way to start the last week of June. Now, as a journalist by trade, a change practitioner by choice, I do believe that words are events and they shape expectations and assumptions and realities. So I would just in best practice, I would love to start maybe taking a couple of minutes just to clarify, for the purpose of our conversation today, what do we mean by employee satisfaction, brand advocacy, and equally employee experience and brand reputation? Because what I'm seeing around me every day is that these are expressions that people take as self-explanatory. Yet when we go into the details of what they stand for and what they entail and how people experience them, then we have slightly different takes on the matter. So just a very, very quick outline of these notions for the purpose of our conversation moving forward. And what I will do, I will go diagonally as usual. So Tony, I will ask you to be our pioneer, and then everybody, the unmuting competition will be officially open. Just jump in and build on one another. So Tony, what do we mean by these expressions?
Yeah, and you're right, I think, to clarify as well, because often terms are used interchangeably, sometimes that ought not to be. If I start with brand reputation from the back, for me, an employer brand reputation is what people say about your company and what they imagine it's like to work there. So that's for me what brand reputation I would say is. Employee satisfaction for me is quite a baseline. It's quite a low limiting benchmark of how people feel to experience working in your organization. So for me, satisfaction sits under engagement. Engagement is when you are willing to give more than you're asked for at your head and your heart level. That satisfaction is simply, do I believe I am getting a fair deal for what I give and what I get in return? Like nothing spectacular, nothing up and beyond, but do I think I get a fair deal? And the other one, sorry, Manola? There was
brand
three,
advocacy and employee experience.
Yeah, employee experience are the actions and the day-to-day touch points that an organization has between the employer and its employees that normally determines how satisfied and how engaged they eventually are. And then advocacy is how much people are willing to go out and tell a good story that turns into the brand reputation.
Thank you so very much.
That would be my take on it.
Who wants to build on this? I saw a lot of smiles and nodding, so I think we're moving forward quite enthusiastically. Elizabeth, I see you unmuted, and then Joe.
Yeah, so I wanted to say that after Tony's explanation, there's not much to add to that except to, break it down into everyday, in case there's anyone who maybe did further explained. So I'll just say, brand reputation is what people imagine your business is. Yeah, and she said quite eloquently. But the one I want to talk about is brand advocacy. Is when your employees feel proud and they feel accountable for how your brand reputation is perceived. That's what I would add to brand advocacy. There's some pride in promoting your business. But for the rest, I don't have any. She did it thank you.
Thank you. Joe.
Yeah, I also think that the employee experience is more internally facing, right? So that is to measure those that are closest to the situation, right? What is their sentiment about how they feel about the organization, as opposed to brand reputation, which is outward facing. You're trying to reach people that don't know the day to day. I know I'm stating the obvious here, just trying to pull it apart a little bit more, and that could mean that we as an organization have to figure out what are the wants and needs of people we've never met, right? So they become our customers, and the way that we communicate to them might be a little bit different from how we communicate inward. Should they be? We can debate that, but I think that it involves over communicating and making sure that in order to have a good brand reputation, solid brand reputation, you need the employee satisfaction piece to be settled first. If you don't have that, you can't have a legitimately positive brand reputation.
Melissa, I can only imagine how it feels in the hot seat of going last on this one.
No, kudos to my fellow panelists. Well done. I think, Tony, you said it very well. The only thing I'd add is trying to tie it all together. So all of these different elements that represent, what you want to express to the world about your company through an employee value proposition. So the employee value proposition, whether you have a statement or components or however you want to express it at your company, it's trying to tie those elements together to create the right picture that you want to share with the world. So whether it's employee satisfaction or engagement or the experience, right? You're trying to share that experience with the world so you can attract talent. And we do that through employee value proposition and really trying to create the right messaging that will land with your audience. And so tying all those wonderful things together into, the right message that for the talent you're trying to attract is how the audience may want to think about pulling that together.
Thank you all so very much. And spoiler alert, we will go into where do we start? What are the building blocks? What's an EVP? How do we go about this? But there is one underlying theme that I picked up from what you've shared so far, and that is authenticity. So when we look at how, what fuels brand reputation, what fuels meaningful employee experience, to start with the basic, how would you rate authenticity, or how would you go about all this being authentic? I love the point that you very early on made, that it's not marketing and it's not packaging and it's not just sugarcoating and a nice narrative with a lot of wordsmithing around it. So how would you bring authenticity in the conversation around all these notions that we touched on? And Joe, I would give you the e-mic to go first on this one.
Yeah, I think that I try to think about the opposite first, right? When you're inauthentic, that means that you make excuses, right? And we see that sometimes with employee engagement surveys where the employees are saying one thing and then consistently, and then leadership might be rationalizing it away, right? On the flip side, when I see authentic environments, I see organizations that really adapt to the feedback that they receive, and that no matter who you might ask the same question to, you're going to get a similar kind of response. I think that's one way of showing authenticity. I also think that showing authenticity means describing the good, bad, and indifferent about your company. And what I haven't seen companies do, because they want to try to position themselves in the best light possible, they don't really talk a lot about what kinds of people might not thrive at your organization. And just because your organization might not be the best fit for somebody, a specific person or a specific kind of, personality, doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad place. It just means that it's a place that they can't thrive. So I would love for us to see more discussion about that.
Yeah, one of the things I really like is when you see organizations, there's a lot of examples out there. Molly is one of my favorite, which is a fintech company in the Netherlands. When they really hand over like their socials or a channel to their employees to get real, this is the day in my life. And I think when you get that level of authenticity, you also get that ability to self-select your out as a candidate and say, you know what, this sales guy, I mean, he's spending the whole day in the car, for example. That's so not what I would want. Or, this woman is constantly at her laptop. Yeah, that's not for me. I want to be in person in an office. I want to be sitting around. So I think when you tell the true stories by literally giving that day in a life camera perspective, you also have the ability for people to choose for themselves when they want to step out and say, yeah, this is probably not what I thought, and it's not for me.
Yeah, that something really struck me. So when we are hiring in a situation where we've needed to build an EVP that helps us attract the best people in an organization that maybe was on a journey to transform, this is real life story now. One of the most powerful things that we've had to, when we employed authenticity, is actually leveraging employee stories. So you could have someone in an interview panel talking to, this hotshot we really want to join our team, but they're talking from a point of, this is why I'm here. So even if the candidate doesn't ask the question, why are you still at XYZ? We made it a point of call for all our panelists to answer the question. I'm still here. I joined because of this reason. And then I met a few things that didn't quite play out how I imagined. However, I'm still here and I'm happy to be here because we're making an impact for XYZ reason. Now, the thing that I found, the foundation I found that helps those employee stories stay authentic is if they are tied to the reality of your core values, how your business is modeling the reality of the core values that you say you espouse. So people don't go making up stories because, yeah, you're hiring someone, just expect that they're intelligent enough to call the BS and know when you're just, packaging, as we say. But if someone has an authentic story to talk about their real experience that's mixed with some of the good, bad, and different, like Joe said, it comes through. And they see that you're not just sugarcoating, then they can ask some more in-depth questions to go into what you've said. That's how I see it play out. Yeah.
The only thing I'd add to that is, kind of re-emphasizing the point around employee stories. So a lot of what the panelists have talked about is how do you get your employees to tell the stories of their work experience? And that could be an interview, but it could be, in video content or in testimonials or other ways that you can use to help create that brand reputation. But ultimately, by giving and empowering your employees to be those storytellers, whether it's in an interview or in a panel discussion, I think is really how you can bring that authentic point of view to life. And ultimately, it serves you as the company best by being authentic, because you don't want somebody to be surprised when they join your company and be like, wow, that's really, I heard something different when I interviewed for the role. And so it is always the best to say, hey, this is who we are, and this is how you're going to succeed. This is what is amazing about our company, and this is what it's like to work here, so that people know what to expect when they come in. They're set up for success, and then they can enjoy that experience along with your other employees.
I love what comes through your answers, that at the end of the day, these are profoundly individual experiences. As much as we want to tailor them for larger categories of people within the workforce, but at the end of the day, it is a profound individual adventure and journey through the organizations. So through this lens, I would really encourage people in the audience, how have you been experiencing this in your own reality, whether you have cultural nuances or generational nuances or industry-based differences, whatever intersection, this is a challenging word for me, intersectionalities you're representing. How is your individual journey from employee experience into brand reputation? And for the next one, I would love to break the pattern that we're building with Melissa going last. So I would ask Melissa to lead us into this slice of the conversation. Where do we start? And for everybody who's already inspired and fired up in the audience, where should they start? What do we look at first? How do we make the first basic decisions on where to focus our energy and effort?
Sure. So for me, the foundation of all of this is the company's mission and purpose. So why does the company exist in the first place? What product are you trying to bring to the market? Who do you want to be as an organization? That to me is the foundation. And then building from there is the employee experience that we've talked about. So what is it like for an employee to work in your company? Who are they working with across the organization? And really getting to that, the foundation of how do I express what it is to be at this particular company through the purpose of the organization and the values of the organization. So somebody else touched on values. I think that's critical. It's like, who are we as a company? Who do we want to be? And then how do we take that and share it with the right audiences, the ones that we're really trying to attract. So to me, that is the foundation. And then building on that is how do you cultivate that sense of pride in your organization so that people feel empowered to speak on your behalf and to be brand advocates.
Okay, I'll go.
Please.
Yeah. So if you build on from that, when you are clear on what mission and vision, and of course the values that help you achieve that, you want to start from finding out where you are. So talking about an organization that already exists. And if you sort of do ask where you are, your people will tell you where you are. How well are you doing with your values? Is your culture really what you say it is? Because, most of the time we have our aspirations of what we think the culture that supports the mission should be. But we're not always there. So you want to start from finding out where are those places you need to, influence. You want to close whatever gaps exist. But I'm a stickler for starting with the things that are empowering to do. So it's easier to be louder with the parts of your culture that are already positive. So if you get your employees advocating based on what they're proud of. So when we tried to build an EVP in about 2 organizations I've worked in, we started with what was already true, what the people could be supportive of, what drove their engagement with working in the organization. For some people, something as simple as working with brilliant people. They're just like, all the companies I've worked in, I've got the opportunity to work with people that I actually admire. Yeah, and we double click on that. to build that positive voice. And then we try to close the gaps in the things that we know we're not really doing well on. But building from where there's already a strength gives you, the muscle to close your gaps. So I would start with clarifying what your business is about. What kind of people do you need to be to make your vision achievable, your mission achievable, and then finding out where you are, starting from the positive parts to, start to strengthen and work the muscle of increasing your voice there, and then improving what needs to be. And you'll find all those out from your people that you already have.
Yeah, I think about Amazon, right? When people are selling on Amazon, they have a new product, they're pushing it out there. What do? They give their product to a bunch of influencers to rate it. They will have them capture video, capture pictures, talk about their experience with the product, in their own way. I'm not advocating specifically for that because we would want to maintain integrity of the process, but I think for purposes of building momentum, if you're finding that there are success stories to share, give your employees the platform and tools to share it. And I think that's just one way that organizations struggle from my perspective. Employees don't know what they can or can't say sometimes online. You see a lot of complaints on LinkedIn, but the positive stories, I think people are more comfortable clicking repost of what the company's already putting out there. So maybe if that's what they're comfortable with, start out with some snapshots of the employee experience, and then encourage your workforce to engage with that content. So give them some tools and instructions to get started, so they know what the expectation is.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, Joe, because it is, if you look at, certainly within the European landscape, but I can imagine the US as well, most companies and large organizations have social media policies, and in violation of those, you're going to get in trouble. So, when in doubt, do nothing. I agree, is how people often feel. But I think there is also a part of, the people who are the most advocating, they don't necessarily use the same types of platforms that the senior leaders do. You don't typically find the most active LinkedIn users when they're 23 or 24 in a tech company. But so I think I just expand what you're saying, Joe, and really give them the tools across all the platforms to meet them where they're at. If they want to shout about working for you on Insta or on TikTok or anything else, give them like the headers or the whatever it is that you want to equip them with, and indeed rooting it in stories and what you're very strong at and you can really stand behind, so it has that authenticity. Fully agree.
Maybe just one kind of practical point for those comments is give your employees some training, right? So what should your LinkedIn profile say? What should you say when you reshare that, so that you can bring your authentic voice or your opinion to something that the company says, right? So to the point on resharing, just getting somebody to add a little bit of a comment at the top that has their perspective, not only does that help your company, but it also helps your employees. So showing your employees what's in it for them is that they build their own brand reputation as well, right? As an advocate and an employee of your company, but also it benefits the company by getting that employee voice out there. So whether it is on LinkedIn or on Insta or whatever social platform that is going to be critical for your company, where you're going to reach your audience, giving them the tools and a little toolkit to help them both build their own brand reputation, which is, a benefit for them, but also helps the company at the same time.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, we are in the middle of our conversation, which is quite a frustrating thing to realize, because I feel like we could go on for at least 2 hours on this topic. But listening to you, I was reminded of that quote that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. And whenever we're in conversations around employee experience and employee engagement and taking it further into brand reputation, I feel like that saying applies quite accurately in a lot of conversations. Now, Joe, I loved your point around how oftentimes we can either rationalize survey results away, or we are using those for vanity metrics. So I would ask you to go first on this one. When we think about metrics and data to inform the design and the decisions, what would your recommendations be?
One thing I'd say you should keep is the Net Promoter Score, right? That's going to be your bottom line metric across the board for employee sentiment. But I also think that you should come up with questions that really dig deeper than surface level. So for example, you could ask an employee about how they feel. Leadership is in touch with the realities on the ground, right? So understanding their perception of perception, how easy or difficult it is to do their job, right? You can ask them about how, I'm trying to come up with this on top of my head, but you could ask them how, what are some things that they had expected coming into the company that aren't reality? If they could wave a magic wand, what would be some things that they would change? That's where you could really start to pull apart where their head's at, but also allow room for comments. The comments can really tell you what the employees mean by their response. And I've seen this be a challenge with engagement surveys is you look at the score and then sometimes you reinterpret or misinterpret how the employee is perceiving that question. So I think you should be very careful and clear about the intent behind the question, and then use comments to make sure that you're understanding what the employees are actually saying.
Great point, and I will just you just made a mental post-it for psychological safety. So we will come and talk a little bit about that. But let's hear some other opinions about metrics and data.
And
Tony.
this is the metrics of brand reputation is, I assume, what we're talking about in this specific regard. And then, I mean, for me, it's a very obvious one, but using, I think, probably globally the biggest platform and measure of company reputation is Glassdoor. And it's used to different degrees in different markets, but I think it's holistically the number one measure of reputation. And the interesting thing, though, is quite often you see diametric responses. So you've got the people who are like insanely happy and the people who are left, normally ex-employees who are insanely unhappy with their experience. But what I've done at a couple of companies, and I've seen others do, and I think it's really worthwhile, is also looking to understand from people, would they be interested and willing to share their honest review, whether it's good, bad, or middling, but just asking people who currently work in the organization to share their views. And that's something that I think we should try and do more often in organizations. Again, not at the point of, I've just arrived and I don't really know what I'm talking about, so I'll just give a nice view of the interview experience. And not necessarily just at the point where you're saying goodbye, but really just in the middle of their life cycle. So whatever, 6-12 months in, how are people feeling about it? And for me, it's such a great way to authentically measure the employee perception and create a reputation based on reality. And I think that is something, if we could get in the habit of doing, other than at those points of just arrived or just leaving, we could build ourselves a very valuable metric, really, of brand reputation in the way that our marketing colleagues often would do the same. So that's something I like to champion, and it gives you incredible insights that are then publicly available, which I think goes to that next level of transparency and authenticity.
So I think again, if I was going to try to make this practical for our panelists, there's different methodologies through surveys that you can implement at your company to help bring your brand to life. And so in terms of the employee experience spectrum, you a lot of companies are doing a candidate survey. So during that interview process, what was your experience like, whether or not you were hired? And I think it's particularly important to pay attention to those people that you didn't make an offer to. What are they saying about their experience and how their interview showed up? And then post-hire, you might have an onboarding survey, right? Which is going to be somewhere around 30 days. Okay, how did everything go? And are we meeting your expectations so far? But I think a really nice one is maybe at that like 90+ day mark where you ask specifically, is what we said during the interview process, is that your reality? And then they can share their experience. Did we represent ourselves accurately during that interview process? Is the role what you expected? Is what we told you it would be? And then the annual employee experience survey that you might do, depending on your business schedule, right? At certain points throughout the year, we do ours at the end of the year. And then, each quarter, maybe there is an employee net promoter score, which is just that very snapshot in time. It's like, how are people feeling at this moment? And then taking that feedback and understanding that it is just one snapshot in time, similar to an employee, the overall larger surveys, but at least it gives you a regular cadence throughout the year of what your employees are feeling and thinking at a given point in their overall journey, right? Whether they're new, whether they've been with a company for years, you're still regularly asking for their feedback and then using those comments to do something with it. So one of the, the main frustrating points for employees is like, hey, I gave you this survey feedback, but you didn't do anything with it. Why should I answer in the future? So long as you demonstrate that, hey, thank you so much. This is what we're doing about it, both the good stuff that we want you to share with the world, but also we heard you on this point about learning and development, or this point about, needing stronger management, whatever it might be, and demonstrate that you are focusing on those things. And it gives your employees that sense that my feedback matters. And it will then therefore, create that virtuous cycle of I'm being heard. And so I can then therefore feel comfortable expressing myself about the company in public places like Glassdoor as well.
That's such a great point, Melissa. And about a year and a half ago, we had a conversation with a colleague of mine because people said, oh, there's survey fatigue. And the counter argument was that, no, there's survey inaction fatigue. These are two very different conversations. Elizabeth, thank you for giving me a few seconds. I saw you unmuted there.
No problem. I really love what you said about the survey fatigue versus survey inaction fatigue. That's one of the reasons why I'm not really an advocate of the employee engagement surveys, unless there is the force behind implementing the feedback that we have. The employee net promoter score, one of the ways, so in addition to what everybody said, which is creating avenues for your people to go public with their feedback of the company on Glassdoor, because most people go to Glassdoor when they feel like, yeah, I have to go. This is my time to get back at the company. But we want positive promoters, creating some motivation around that. Now, there's one other way that I've found to measure how employees are feeling about a business is through employee referrals. So are they willing to ask their family members and friends to apply here? We launch employee referral programs, and sometimes you have to chase people. You haven't sent us referrals, you haven't sent CVs. That should tell you something. Yeah. If people are falling over themselves to bring people to your business, that should tell you something. Then another topic is when, for some leaders of businesses, owners of businesses, they sort of tell HR people, don't put out people in the public, a day in the life of XZ. They don't want that online because they're like, you'll expose them to competition, you'll come and poach them. And my response to that is, if your people are feeling happy and if they're engaged, yeah, they wouldn't be easily poached. So if you're afraid that getting them to publish the feedback on Glassdoor, positive feedback, and talk about their positive experiences and how they feel like they're growing and contributing, it means that there's stuff to be done. Like your employee value proposition isn't strong enough. So yeah, I would say focus on asking your people who've been there, find out what's your long service average. They said 1 year, 18 months, 6 months. Is that the longest time? The average long service for your employees, 10 years. Ask those people, simple question, why are you still here? And find out what is in between the lines. I find that the most effective way to get this is through forums. So when they answer that survey, you have a conversation with them where people just say, okay, speaking for a friend, I might not be the one who said this, yeah, in quotes, but this is the reason why somebody might have said that. Those forums, you get gold from them, actual gold that you can implement to improve your employee value proposition and brand reputation.
Thank you. I see quite a few comments that basically boil down to the fact that employee engagement and brand reputation, at the end of the day, they're very powerful organizational culture statements in and of themselves. Now, I am sure that all of us on the screen and everybody in the audience, we can so easily remember at least one conversation, and I'm making an understatement here, at least one conversation when the reflex reaction to employee engagement or brand reputation was that, oh, that's an HR thingy. So I would invite all of you to dismantle this reflex, and let's take a few minutes and look at who's who in the zoo of employee engagement and brand reputation, and how is the accountability and the responsibility split across the organization. And there are extra points available if we can also touch on who or what roles have specific responsibilities around psychological safety and authenticity. And we will do this popcorn style as inspiration strikes. I will give you a few seconds, just enough to welcome people who joined a little bit later. For those of you who haven't seen the comments that Jessa posted right at the beginning and you're wondering, this conversation is being recorded, so you can always go back and watch or listen to the parts that you missed or recommended forward, either from the same LinkedIn link a few minutes after we stop the live, you will see the recording, or from our platform. Now, who's who in the zoo, and where lies the authenticity and the psychological safety accountability? Let's see. Where is the inspiration for this one? We've rehearsed the unmuting for a couple of rounds, so it should come natural.
I'll jump in. So, I mean, there were two different questions. So Manola, help me if I'm not answering exactly the right question. But what I heard is, who's responsible for creating a culture of psychological safety at your company? And so I think it's primarily management and leadership. So, it's particularly middle managers or frontline managers, right? They are impacting the most number of employees at your organization. So teaching them to create a culture where they feel safe speaking up and taking risk. Not only does it create a sense of belonging, right? And I feel included because I want to be heard, but I feel like I belong here at this organization. That it's going to create an environment where people feel comfortable innovating, and that ultimately drives results for your company. But it's also up to anybody who is in an organization to create that right environment for your team. And so I think every employee has an opportunity to help create psychological safety. So we often look to our managers, but how are you showing up every day in a way that makes your colleagues or your peers or whomever you're interfacing with feel comfortable and included, and like their opinion matters? I think that's critically important. The second question, which I heard, is who is going to be responsible to be a brand advocate in your organization? And at least in my organization, we are multi-generational. So it's one of those organizations that is a more mature tech company. And so we have early career talent right out of school, but we also have people who continue to work because they love the work that they do, even kind of what you think might a retirement age be. And so for us, we have this opportunity to attract talent in all of those phases of life. And so we really think it's incumbent upon everybody to help be an advocate for the company. But of course, we focus on our hiring managers as well to help bring that to life as they're attracting. I have a role open. How am I going to attract the right talent? I'm going to look at my team and my organization to help bring that to life. So hopefully I answered, Manola, what you were getting at, but I'll have others jump in if I missed something.
Perfect. Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, I would build. I agree with everything Melissa said there. And I would also probably zoom in on a few other who's that I think are critical in building brand reputation. Hiring managers when there is an active role, no doubt. But on a more general basis, I really see the role of the CEO and the C-suite as being hugely important. If they are silent on the topic of their company and their culture and why anyone should care about it, you already, I feel, lose the credibility of all the other stories that might follow. So I put a lot on the C-suite. Second group is your kind of corporate communications group if you're in a larger organization. So basically, who is running your socials, who's running your Insta page, your LinkedIn page, what stories are they publishing and how? So I think this is really incumbent. And certainly in my previous company, I had a kind of deal with the corporate communications director that any story that went out would always have a red thread of either the culture, the values, or the people going through it. So because otherwise it's a missed opportunity. So I think that's a group I would highlight. And then probably last, but actually almost the most important group for me is talent acquisition. The recruiters. Now, whether they're in-house or you're working with partners, I don't care. These are the people who are literally the shop window. And so for me, those are the people that I also think need to be your most solid advocates. They need to be super happy. For me, if there is somebody in talent acquisition who is not happy in their jobs, I almost don't want them doing that job, because this is really where the rubber hits the road on brand, story, and reputation. So on top of everyone that Melissa called out, those three groups I would also highlight as being key enablers.
Where shall we go next? Elizabeth.
Okay. So I absolutely agree with what Melissa and Tony have said. And there's, all of us here on this panel also have a role that sort of sets the guardrails for what this looks like in the business. Not saying that the entire responsibility relies on the HR head or the C-suite HR person, but if you don't have someone who is intentional about that, holding everyone, all the accountable parties accountable, then people will just be shooting in the dark, and it might work and it might not work. There's someone who has to sort of design the framework that holds everyone accountable in the direction that the business needs to go. And that's in the functional head of people. Now, where that's not, even if you have a functional head of people, back to what Tony and Melissa said, if the CEO and the C-suite are not interested, flat on the face is not working. And then if the hiring managers or the people leading teams are not living up to that, then it doesn't work. So for psychological safety, now to the second question, I think there's the, what would I call it, the continuum of psychological safety, which is sort of designed at company level from the top, but is maintained or built from the middle management, the frontline managers. Now, if you are in the opposite of a psychologically safe company, a toxic environment, there could be pockets of teams that have developed psychological safety because the frontline managers or leaders who are there. So you could have someone having a different experience from what the rest of the organization is, or the other way around. So psychologically safe thing, but there's a leader who isn't living up to that, and then they have a pocket of toxicity. So psychological safety, is the responsibility first to maintain it, but the importance of it needs to be set from the top. But the maintenance of it and the acceptance of the importance of it is from management. People most of the time don't leave the business for macro reasons. They leave because of the experience they're getting. And in that small set, they get the experience from how they interact every day, how their work has value, what their manager is supporting or not. If that's not really working, the wider organizational experience that drives engagement might be lost. It might filter through and just get lost. So frontline management drives psychological safety, but the environment for it needs to be championed from the top.
Thank you. Joe.
Yeah, I agree with everything everyone has said, and I've been struggling too to really identify where it starts and where it ends. When I think about it, I mean, really everybody in the organization is responsible for something about brand reputation, right? And when I think about even product development, engineers, they have to be highly accountable, highly have high integrity. The integrity of your product or service is what your clients respond to, what they purchase, right? And so that all stems from how the organization is operating internally, and we see that in the news media, right? In the United States, especially, I'm speaking from where there are companies that we're starting to see the inner workings of their companies, that there isn't accountability, and so there are safety issues going on that are that the public is responding to. So I think about that. I think about every other team too. Finance, we need high accountability in there to make sure that the business is operating soundly. It's responsible to its investors, its shareholders if it's a public company, and making sure that they are operating in a way that is accountable, and that also builds the reputation. So really, I think that how it starts from the top is holding every single functional area accountable for maintaining their own reputation where they can control it. So not everybody can, as one employee, I can't influence the entire company's reputation, but I can make sure that everything that I'm doing in my own function is supporting the company's accountability. And I think that's how one way you can build brand reputation.
Well, we are entering the last 8 minutes of our time together today. And I was struggling to decide between several questions, but I finally settled on the following. For those of us in the audience who are like, oh, I will really focus on this bit of work and I really want to make a difference. Can we maybe name a skill or a capability that is not among the usual suspects that come to mind when we think about employee engagement and brand reputation, that they can maybe focus on and develop, like really an outlier skill that not everybody associates naturally with this body of work. And I will give you a few seconds to think about, and we will start with Tony on this one. And the question
can
is,
I just
to
say, can you just clarify?
Yeah,
sorry.
Like, I want to start doing more employee engagement and brand reputation work within my organization.
Yeah.
Now, do I have the skills and the capabilities to do it meaningfully? And name one skill that I might possibly not think about that would definitely help me do this work.
Yeah, perfectly. And I just wasn't sure if you were really thinking for the HR lens, but indeed. So assuming most of our audience are probably from the HR territory, um, I think the one that would maybe come to mind is questions and active listening. So if you think about all the things that we've maybe referenced throughout the last hour, a lot of them come down to asking great questions, open questions, and really being prepared to listen to what your own people are telling you rather than fitting it to the story you want to tell everybody else. So maybe when people embark on building an EVP or building an employer brand campaign, they do tend to start from what is the story I want to tell, and not what is the story that's playing out in my organization that we should be telling. So I really think if you can get more of your market research hats on, okay, let me go and dig into some focus groups to really understand and be really willing and open to listen. Do the same, by the way, with your Glassdoor data. But yeah, I think that would be the skill and the practical advice I would give, rather than just thinking, oh, fun, we get to build some nice videos and we're like, what's our tagline, which is a bit more, I think, where certainly my teams in the past have got a little bit hyperactive on early doors. So I would really get to the fundamentals. So asking questions and active listening to the answers.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Yes. So when Tony said active listening, I was like, "Aish," because I actually think like that's the most fundamental skill for this. But to layer on top of that, if you have active listening skills, but you don't have empathy, you might not be able to build the best EVP for your company. So you hear, listen to hear, but be able to put yourself in the shoes of the people who are communicating what you've asked. And then you can design, someone just said empathy. You can design what helps to promote that.
Thank you. I hear a bit of design thinking in what we shared today as well. Joe.
I think you also need to be able to prioritize. This can seem like such a huge task, right? And then when it's so big, we tend to stall, we freeze, right? So when you're even when you're starting to capture data, start small. Make sure that it is something that you can achieve in a reasonable amount of time so that you can build momentum, and then build upon that as you go along.
I was going to say user-centered design. So Manola, you stole my answer. But the other thing that I would add is just kind of reflecting on the conversation, making sure that as people practitioners, we always go back to, what is the strategy of the business, and making sure we pull that into everything we do about how we market and brand ourselves externally. How are we going to meet our business strategy? That might be a specific culture, that might be a specific working style or an operating model. And so if we always think back, and this is true for HR practitioners and other businesses as well, sometimes we're designing for ourselves and not really designing for the company. And so putting that lens of the company strategy, the company mission and purpose on again, and making sure you're weaving that into everything you do. So more of a reminder than anything else, than a unique skill. So.
Wonderful. Maybe I would add, which really overlaps with everything that you shared. But I think storytelling deserves a call out for itself. And I was also looking through the comments and going back to some of your answers. I would also put cultural competence and understanding that different cultural profiles find meaning in different expressions of employee satisfaction and employee engagement. And brand reputation can have amazing cultural nuances, especially in multicultural or international environments. Now, we are 2 minutes away from saying goodbye. And I promise this is the last challenge of the day. So think about the best brand reputation that you can think of. How does that feel in one word? So what is one word by which you would express what a best brand reputation feels like? And what we will do, we will pass the mic around counterclockwise. That means that Joe will go first, otherwise no pressure. And I will pass the mic around. But just take a few seconds to think about one word. And I would just like to thank everybody in the audience for being here, for engaging with our conversation. Keep this topic alive and just open similar conversations with people around you in your organizations and see where it would lead you. So, Joe, best brand reputation, how does it feel? One word.
Inspiring.
Thank you. Tony.
Authentic.
Thank you. Melissa.
I was going to say inspiring too, but I don't know the right word to say that. Like I want to be there, right? That's what you hope is what brand representation does. Is that you're like, I want to be a part of that organization.
Magnetic.
Somebody else, yeah.
Magnetic, I think, is what you're describing.
There you go. That's it. Magnetic. Yes. Thank you, Tony.
Inspiring, authentic, magnetic. Elizabeth, what's yours?
Empowering.
Wonderful. Elizabeth, Melissa, Tony, and Joe, it was absolutely wonderful. Thank you for taking the time and the generosity and the energy to be here. Thank you for all your insights. Thank you, everybody in the audience. And last but not least, thank you, Jessa and Enrique, for making this conversation happen. Have a wonderful rest of the last week of June, and I will definitely see you around. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.